I think the other thing too, when I think about love in our community, is having empathy, compassion, and grace. You know, that trio, because our community is so highly stressed, and people are barely surviving, and so emotions run high, and they run at a very surface level that people get ticked off really quickly. Yep. And what perpetuates violence, I think, in our communities is like, okay, you have one person that got really upset about something and another person that reacted, and then it just self-perpetuates, right? Because it's a vicious, like, violent cycle. And so I think that when I really think about love in our community, if we could have all three of those things, and people, you know, build their practice around empathy, compassion, and grace, you know, so that if, you know, that one person who is really stressed, can't make ends meet, you know, pops off, that there'll be enough of us to be able to absorb that shock and diffuse it. And I think really when we just, you know, all these really complicated strategies aside, it really, those three things, to me, if we could all work on that, that would truly be love.
Welcome back to the episode here on the Hart Hustle Podcast. Tiffany, you went from being a single mom in a Head Start program to becoming the chief program officer of that same organization. That's just not full circle. That's a whole revolution. Take me to the moment you realize I'm just not surviving anymore. I'm actually leading.
Oh, wow. That's a very good question. I think when, like, at the point that I bought a house, I think, like, on the personal level is like, okay, I'm in Oakland, I'm in the Bay Area, has a really high cost of living. I am able to buy a house. So I think for me, that was the point at which it felt like I wasn't struggling anymore. But on the professional level, I think when I realized I was a leader, was when, even when I was silent, people were still trying to evoke something from me. Like, so I'd be in these rooms of people and I wouldn't necessarily be saying something, but people would actually begin to look at me for validation of what they were saying. So primarily if, you know, people are out here and they're not in the trenches and they want to talk about community. What I realized was that, you know, when people would talk about community, they would often look to me for validation, you know, that I can confirm what it is that they're expressing that's going on in the community.
What's also I really want to kind of touch on, Tiffany, is that the first time you spoke to me was that not that you hit rock bottom, right? Just one thing changed, one small thing changed. And because a lot of times when we talk about nonprofits, communities, and really helping those, it could be any of us, right? And you just had that moment where it happened to be you. And it wasn't that you didn't have a degree and it just life happened the way that it did. What is some of the things you're thinking about? Someone that has gone to school, someone that was educated, someone that had the job, but life just happened, and then you become the statistics per se. What were you feeling like during those times?
I think in the beginning, it was a really dark place because in my generation, it was, you know, like, even though I had gone to schools that were not the best, you know, in our city, we always knew that there was brilliance. And I think there's a group of young people at that time who just knew they would do anything to get out of their environment. And my home environment wasn't so bad, but the community that I lived in really juxtaposed everything that I was being taught at home. And
Yeah.
so for me, in the beginning, it was like, okay, I did what I was supposed to. Like I graduated high school, I went on to college, I graduated from college, and then, now here I am with child and also can't live where I want to live because it's so expensive here that I have to
Mhm.
go back into the neighborhoods that raised me. Not that it was necessarily a bad thing. I just think that when you think about your life's expectation, it was not to go back to Deep East Oakland, and
Yeah.
that's where I ended. So I think it was very much a really dark time. Also, is during the Great Recession. So not only was rents explosive here in the Bay Area, um, I was also very underemployed.
Mhm.
I couldn't find a job that could take care of me and my family.
I ask you, you lived in so many different places, Guam, Hawaii, Washington, California. How do you think all those cultural shifts really shaped your voice as a leader today as well? You mentioned how there was a time people were still taking when you probably didn't have to give, but that allowed you to realize, like, wow, there's so much more in who I am and what I have to offer. Um, like, how did that really shape who you are today in the way that you lead in this organization?
Mhm. So I think because I'm Pacific Islander and I did come from Guam, and in my family, that was something that was instilled. Like
Mhm.
I can grow up in this Black community, but you are not Black. You are Chamorro and you are a Filipino, and this is, no matter what happens on out here, this is what I was instilled with. So my mother passed away when I was young. And so it was my father who was the one that raised us and really instilled these values of of being proud of who you were. And I think that, you know, being from Guam, knowing that my family had a history of going from Guam to Hawaii to Washington and then to California, what I learned later on as an adult that was very much a Chamorro diasporic trail of how
Mhm.
we end up here in the States. And because my father never let us forget that, even though I may have been cultivated as a leader, um, as an American, there was always something that kept me connected to being back home. And also learning more about who I am and where my community comes from. So as a leader today here at the Unity Council, I always talk about wayfinding and I always talk about navigation because Chamorros were wayfinders.
Mhm.
And I think that in times of uncertainty, that has really, I've been able to think back to some of those wayfinding skills and to really utilize them to move us forward, even in times of uncertainty. So there are a lot of things around wayfinding. There are, like, when you think about being on the ocean, there is no then there aren't very many physical signs, right? There's
Mhm.
not a tree here that you would turn right. You literally have to be very conscious and cognizant of the things that are more nuanced and able to like move forward. So that's the stars, looking at wind patterns, looking at the waves and how they're formed, or the clouds and how they're formed. Those things I think aren't um, those things I think are not things that like are so obvious. You like
Yeah.
really have to dig deep in order to really understand what's going around you in the environment.
Love it, Tiffany. I love it. I actually want to it's crazy you think about where you're at today, right? The office, the facility. Looking back, what advice do you give that younger version of yourself that walked into this facility with the need for help, and then, thinking about where you're at today, if you could just talk to your younger self, what are you saying?
What am I saying to my younger self? I think I'm going to say that I mean, this is kind of cliche, but it will get better. And whatever doesn't kill you is only going to make you stronger. But I would also like to congratulate her because she showed a lot of vulnerability that
Hmm.
typically most people would shy away from.
Hmm.
And I was so desperate that I think I hit this decision where it was like, you're either going to let people know where you really are and let them help you, or you're going to die. It was like that grave of a decision. And
Yeah.
so I had decided, like, okay, I've got to be vulnerable. I can't, because before, remember, I told you before, I was a professional already before I
Yeah.
had kids, right? And so people thought, oh, she'll just figure it out. Like, she was doing well before. And I struggled a lot early on in motherhood from just not having enough resources and postpartum depression. Postpartum depression was huge. And so it was in that like deepest, darkest moments that I had to make this decision. You are either going to be vulnerable and let people help you, or you're going to have an even harder time. And I didn't
Hmm.
want to have a harder time because I had this little person that depended on me.
Yeah. Yeah, it's that whole, it's not even about us, right? It's what's
Mm-hmm.
best for me and my child, and so much
Mm-hmm.
more. What's best for my child at this point.
Mm-hmm.
So definitely hear you on that. And you really become the leader in the same halls you once really just walked as a participant. How do you not just walk the halls and just think, get emotional knowing that look where I was and look who I am and look what I'm doing, right? And knowing that your child now gets to see mom in this light of helping others, what that actually looks like. How do you carry that, like every single day, still being back at the place that really once changed your life?
With gratitude, with an like perpetuate, like you are just perpetuating gratitude at all
Hmm.
times, because to everybody, to the janitor, to the the driver in the Head Start program that brings mail and supplies from location to location,
Hmm.
to the teachers, you move with a lot of gratitude, uh, and you have to do it because you literally would not be where you are. And in education, we know that educators are like the worst paid. And in early childhood education, the pay is even lower than K-12. And so you know that these women and men are doing it, primarily women too, as well, are doing it because they love community. And you just have to forever be grateful for that. The other thing is, I think not only am I just grateful in the way that I move, I also express the gratitude.
Hmm.
I am the Head Start program's biggest cheerleader. Well, not the biggest, but I'm a huge cheerleader on the executive team. I always want to figure out how the other programs can support Head Start parents and families. And so, like weaving and integrating resources to support those families is one of my main charges here in this role.
I mean, that sounds like a really living in your purpose, right? Like, here I am, they help me, and I just want to be able to help others just like me. And I think that's the bigger picture, is that you're part of an organization. When someone wants to hear a phenomenal story, go to Tiffany and figure out how Tiffany got here, right? Like that should really be the motto, because Tiffany has really played a huge part on what programs is doing. Did you kind of get into that role? Like, what was your role into chief programming officer? Did you just automatically get there because of your background and your profession, or was this some time?
No, how I got to the Unity Council is um, I started off first as a consultant. So they were looking for someone to do
Okay.
business engagement on behalf of the workforce programs. And then it just so happened that they needed somebody to run a program temporarily because somebody was taking leave. And it was right in the middle of the program, starting and launching. And someone came to me and said, I really need help, with this workforce program. Can you come and help? And I remember I had done lots of public health programs. So a program is a program is a program, right? No matter what the topic is. So I just took that over. And then from there, they had grown to then need an associate director of economic development. So I came on as an economic development person. In my portfolio was like basically everything that is in it now, which is, workforce. We had a business improvement district, business services, financial capability programs, and housing. And then from there, we grew even more because of the pandemic, and we started adding a lot more health and social services. So then I became the director of economic development. And from there, I became the chief program officer.
Some time. How to really work your way through those ladders, huh?
Yeah.
There you go. There you go. When someone walks into a Unity console, what are some of the first things, if they don't know anything about the organization, what are some of the first things they're seeing, some of the first things that they're feeling about just life in itself?
So it depends on where you're coming from. So the Unity Council is a 6-year-old community development social equity organization that was started at the height of the Chicano movement in Oakland. And it has grown to serve all communities. So I would think that depending on where they come from, because we don't just do programs, we also build built environments. I think the first thing you're going to feel when you come into the Unity Council is electricity. You are going to feel a lot of buzz, a lot of movement. If you're, as we all know, school programs are chaotic and full of life. We have a Fruitvale Transit Village that is in the Fruitvale, and that is like really just a beacon and a gem in the community. And there's lots of energy and lots of people moving around. We have centers at the Career and Resource Center. The first thing you will see first and foremost is the energy, just the vibrancy of the community, no matter what way you're introduced to the Unity Council. I think the second thing you'll learn is that it's really diverse. So the Unity Council is a Latino organization. But even in that, people are really diverse. So we have Spanish speakers, we have indigenous folks, the Mayan Mom, who are also a huge community now here in Oakland. And so, we have folks that are trilingual. So you will be hearing languages spoken, And so I think, between the electricity and the diversity, you really do see people who are reflective of the community.
So I do remember you saying that and how diverse it is and how you guys hire from the community itself. Purposely, did you guys want to go back into the communities that you guys are serving to make sure that they can also be a representation to others? Like, what was the focus on? Let's hire from within this community, make sure that we have diversity. What was the thoughts behind it?
I think the Unity Council has always done that. It's not something that Tiffany came into this role and she started to do. I'm just following suit of the legacy that is the Unity Council. So what I would say is, Arabella Martinez, amazing woman who founded our organization, I believe that she really believed that the people closest to the problem should be the ones to come up with the solutions. And I think that is a common thread throughout the Unity Council, but I also believe it's best practice no matter where you go in whatever organization, at whatever time period. Like, it's just a best practice to hire and professionalize the folks that are closest to the problem, right? And I would say that for me, I've worked in many different communities. I've worked in the African American community, the LGBTQ community, and you want to be representative of the communities that you serve. That's the only way that you can gain their trust and also bring all these ideas and hope to the community that they, want to be a part of. So I definitely think that is a big, that is a huge theme that happens here at the Unity Council. The Unity Council takes it one step further in that it does its absolute best to try to provide the scaffolding that people need to be able to do the work, because the work is still professional, right? Like the work, we still have deliverables. We still have to be really good stewards of all of the resources that we have to deploy in the community. And it's not like we just hire people off the street and yes, they have good stories and they can connect, but we also have to give them the tactical and the soft skills to be able to grow and to be the best and accountable stewards of the resources that we have, that they're in charge of.
If the Hart Hustle Podcast has ever sparked any idea or made you think differently, do us a favor. Make sure to guys share this, post it on LinkedIn, or even text that nonprofit friend that you just have. Whatever works, this is what keeps the conversation going and allows us to just grow this community together. Seriously, we appreciate you. I want to talk about your role, Chief Program Officer. Maybe for some nonprofits that don't have one, or those are asking themselves, what does that role really entail? Can you give us a little bit more information on what does your day-to-day look like for the organization?
So my day-to-day, I think, is twofold. The first is that it's governance, right? And so it is really being the representative to the executive team on behalf of the programs. And so, so the Unity Council is a big organization. I think we're like a $60 million organization. We have over 350 staff. And so it's not a grassroots, it's not a small organization. It's also not a young one. We're a very mature organization. So in organizations like that, chief of programs, I do some of that as well. That's why I'm saying that. Chief of programs, deals with the governance, ensuring that at the highest levels of the organization, that the programs have a seat at the table, that we ensure that is what is happening will be in service to the programs and therefore the community, right? So, and then the tactical pieces of it is ensuring accountability, ensuring that we're meeting deliverables, ensuring that the leadership in the programs are being developed and they're being kept up to speed. I consider myself more as a global thought leader to the leaders in the different programs, and just cultivating, those relationships, and just ensuring that the staff have everything they need to be able to do their job. The other thing I think Chief of Programs does is, in terms of here at the Unity Council, is that we have to really ensure good communication lines from the frontline workers, all the way up to the board, just ensuring that everybody really understands at varying levels the decisions that are being made, so that there's greater transparency. I think that allows us to move faster because we have more trust, within the organization and with the community. And I would say the last thing is you have to fundraise. Oftentimes it is the development team giving you a lead to build a relationship with a funder that we can, well, not just funders, but external partners, because more than fundraising, chief of programs do a lot of leveraging, either leveraging relationships or resources. And so it really is it's a huge job, and it crosses, so many different intersections within the organization, as well as out in the community.
So just kind of talk about a little bit of what you're saying, right? So you're that middle person between the donors, the community, and doing so many different pieces. How does, I think you might have mentioned when we first kind of had the discovery, where do you fall in line with AI? Is there AI things that you guys are doing now that could help you or are helping you? Or is there things that you can do to actually help you? Have you guys looked into that when it comes to AI?
So we are at the very beginning of our AI journey. First and foremost, because our staff is so diverse and because we do hire from the community, in our community, there is a huge digital gap, So, and just when I'm thinking about our workforce, I would say the majority of our workforce do direct services with folks. So they're either educators or they're coaches. The technology that they use isn't so sophisticated. So we have to do two things. We have to create the infrastructure to be able to use the AI. We need to really understand what AI is out there and would be beneficial for us, as well as change the mindset of our staff to not be afraid of it. I think that's kind of, we're at the beginning of that journey where we're trying to give people introduction to AI, and we're trying to find some low-hanging fruit and some easy to use AI just to get people's feet wet with AI. But we've done things like have surveys. So we've taken surveys, and the things we see in our surveys are of typical things, like generationally. Like young people are way more like anything AI, they want to jump on board and learn to tinker with it and play with it, until they get comfortable. And then we have, our older workforce who's like, yeah, no, privacy reasons, there's just like all these reasons. And so I think it's really exciting to be here and to be looking at that at an organization that is as old as we are, because there are some people here who can remember when email was introduced and how people were just upset about, like, why can't I just go to your office and talk to you? So I think we're doing that again, but for AI.
Yeah, I do hear that. There's that spectrum of the fear of it. There's the dipping my toe in it, and then there's the organization saying, "Oh no, we're really exceeding in what AI actually looks like for organizations." And just from the chief program officer, lenses, when you think about maybe how communication could be different between the community itself and maybe internally, is there any spaces where you feel like AI could really tap in today and really be a 180 for the organization, and any of those, whether it's donations, fundraising, marketing, any of that?
I think that a lot of the programs, the platforms that we currently used have AI going on in the background, and we don't know of it. No, it's not as obvious. I would say that right now we're still trying to take stock of what AI can do for us. I can't answer that question so confidently, because we're still trying to figure out what is it that could be useful to us. And I think, when I think about ChatGPT, I remember in the beginning, ChatGPT, you weren't able to upload documents to compare and contrast, right? Like you needed to read these and synthesize them. I think now, as the tools are getting more sophisticated, we're finding more options that work for us. And it's just really a matter of at what level are people going to use it? I do think that that there could be ways in which AI could take a look at these very long wait lists for services that we have. Our housing program has 800 people on a wait list.
Wow.
I really do believe there's got to be AI out there that can look at the wait list and do the things that we're doing manually with it, and following up with people, texting people to say, hey, do you still need these services? So I am very hopeful that as AI progresses, gets more sophisticated, and then tailors itself to human services, that we'll be able to use it. It's just, I don't think AI has created what we needed yet.
I love it. I feel like you feel in that you are in that curious space. It's not that there's a fear, like I'm for
I
it.
use
I'm
it
just kind of
personally.
curious. Yeah.
I use
But
it.
it's a challenge. It's a
Mm-hmm.
challenge that you mentioned of getting people on board to understand that it's not a replacement. It's a tool for us to become better at what we're doing so that we can gain back time, as you mentioned, to be really more involved with the people that are needing us versus all the back end stuff that it's kind of taking time. So, 100% hear that. For someone who's listening right now, but truly wants to kind of get involved, but feels I don't have enough, because people always think when it comes to nonprofits, I gotta give money, $1, $100. What's the first small move they can actually make without even thinking, hey, you don't need to donate $1, $5, but what can they actually do?
I think the first thing to do is to show up to their events. Nonprofits are always holding events, either for the community. We at the Unity Council, we have a lot of public programming. I think just showing up to the events, consistently showing up to the events, bringing your friends. I also believe that resharing, reposting things that nonprofits post for whatever reasons, I think is also very helpful, because we're not just looking at like when we look at our measurables, we have huge digital measurables or digital deliverables. Like when we put out a newsletter, we like it to have a 50% click-through rate. Like we really do look at that and report back on that to, to our funders, because that's community engagement. So at any point that we offer an engagement, if folks show up, I think that that's the best. And social media is free. So reposting and asking your friends to repost is also something that nonprofits appreciate.
I love that. Yeah, I love when you go to social media. That is so free. Liking, following, sharing doesn't cost you anything, right? I love that you kind of tap into that. If you talked about just, you have so much love for what you do, love for the community. What does loving your community actually look like when you talk about in action, not just the physical words, loving your community?
Oh man. So because we're the Unity Council, we look at community not just as people, but the place. We are a place-based programs. I would say that what love looks like to me is different depending on what, kind of what area. When I think about our lived environment, something as simple as picking up the garbage, not littering. I think because when I have the business improvement district, like we spent, I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of dollars of resources to supplement city services for street sweeping.
Wow.
Something that simple as picking up the garbage, putting it in the container, I think is one of the simple ways I think, we can show that we love the community, because it really does. That act expresses ownership and pride in your community. And we have lots of cleanups here in the Fruitvale. And people come to them. So that is a lot of love. I think the other thing too, when I think about love in our community, is having empathy, compassion, and grace. That trio, because our community is so highly stressed, and people are barely surviving.
Hmm.
And so emotions run high, and they run um, at a very surface level that people get ticked off really
Yep.
quickly. And what perpetuates violence, I think, in our communities is like, okay, you have one person that got really upset about something and another person that reacted. And and then it just self perpetuates, right? Because
Yeah.
this vicious, like, violent cycle. And so I think that if, when I really think about love in our community, if we could have all three of those things and people, you know, build their practice around empathy, compassion, and grace, so that if, that one person who is really stressed, can't make ends meet, pops off, that there'll be enough of us to be able to absorb that shock and diffuse it. And I
Yeah.
think really when we just, all these really complicated strategies aside, it really, those three things, to me, if we could all work on that, that would truly be love.
I like that. I always love the way that you just put things together. But yeah, loving the community, it's simple things, right? It's the things that you can do without having to spend no money on anything. Picking up after yourself. I have this to my daughter all the time when she thinks she's going to throw something in the floor. No, 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 no. What is this called? And she'll tell you littering. Okay, we need to pick this up.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's those small things that really we should be instilling into our youth as well. And as
Mm-hmm.
adults, when we do that, what are we kind of showing our kids? That it doesn't matter, right? Like, to not care. But we should definitely care about where we grow up and where we raise our kids and the streets that we walk in every day, because it makes a difference. I'm a big believer on your environment. It really starts to show in the mindset a lot of the time. So we can get a cleaner environment, you can start to see the mindsets. We won't go from fight to flight, or all the time, or flight to fight, whatever that terminology is. We could really start to see things a little different, have a little bit more empathy, because we walked through clean streets. So I love everything you mentioned. We're gonna go right into that blind question we talked about a little earlier. I know you were excited about this, but what was that moment that you realized you were on the right path, like, for real, not just the mission, but understanding that you're in the right place and God is using you for your, with purpose.
When I couldn't get another job. I always think about, so I do believe that you don't question what God blocks you. I am the believer of that, right? But that doesn't mean I don't aspire for more, or I
Right.
aspire to do different things, or I aspire to move out of the Bay Area. And so I will always take my shot, even if
Yep.
I'm very happy here, where I'm at. I will always take my shot for whatever I think might excite me.
Yeah.
And how I knew I was on the right path is that I was kept here. I was kept in Oakland. I was kept doing this type of work. And at some point, I was just shooting shots just to see, and just kept missing. And I am here, and I am still here. But that doesn't mean that tomorrow I won't apply for that new job, that new shiny job. And people, I think, here, like, even my bosses know that about me, is that because I also let people go
Yeah.
pretty easily. Like, if you decide that you have found another opportunity, I am the biggest cheerleader for people to get out of here.
And
So
grow.
that's
Yeah.
kind of how I know, is that I keep trying to do other things in my life, and I could go anywhere, right? I could go to Guam, I could go back to the Philippines, I could go anywhere. I could go to the East Coast, I could go to Southern California, Washington, but for whatever reason, those things have been blocked, and I am still here. So that's how I know.
You're here. Love it. Doing amazing work, by the way. What is your blind question to the next leader we have here on the Hart Hustle Podcast?
Yes, I did write my blind question. So my blind question is, in our increasingly interconnected world, we often find ourselves at the crossroads of personal fulfillment and global responsibility. Looking at your life's work through both these lenses, the inner journey of self-discovery and the outer impact on our shared world, how have you reconciled your deepest personal sense of purpose with the larger needs of humanity? And what wisdom would you share with others who are struggling to find meaningful alignment between their individual path and the collective challenges we face as a global community?
Someone's gonna be like, oh, she really put me in the hot seat with that question. I love it. I appreciate it. It's always cool to just sometimes really get the leader in the hot seat, really start to think beyond our day to day as well. So I appreciate the question because it allows us to think really so much broader than our day to day and what we do. And sometimes we have to get in our minds to think a little different. So I appreciate the question. Tiffany, where social media are you guys on? Where can they find you guys? Tell us the website. If you guys are on Instagram, Facebook, tell us what that looks like as well. But if people want to know more about your organization, where can they go?
So they can go to unitycouncil.org, and then our handles are all either at Unity Council or at the Unity Council.
I love it, love it. You guys are on Facebook, Instagram, all those other platforms?
Yes.
Love it, love it. Well, Tiffany, thank you so much for your time, for being so just open and just getting to share what you guys are doing, but also your story and how you even got there. Being a member, someone that was using the assistance, to now being one of the leaders that is helping others get that assistance. I think it's a phenomenal story. Thank you so much for being open and sharing with that. Leaders like this truly make a difference. We talk about how can you give without providing any monetary. Well, it's the stories that we get to share. So it's free too, as she mentioned a little earlier. Just tag someone down in the comments, share it with someone as well. Listen, we love to talk to leaders. We want to make sure that we can continue these high conversations at this type of level. So if you guys have enjoyed this, don't forget to subscribe. My name is Ephraim. This has been Tiffany. This is the Hart Hustle Podcast. We'll catch you guys on the next one. Later.
Okay.